Okay, everybody good? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, one of the things that she finds helpful to her work, and which I'm hoping this is the kind of thing we're also through these presentations gaining, is a relationship with elder ceramists such as David McDonald and Jaba, who's from Syracuse, New York, and then Jaba Nala, who's from South Africa. And we've been lucky enough to have Jabu rather, come here and do a demo for us at our museum, and we have some pots of hers. So these interactions have helped her ground her work in the wisdom of those who came before her. She also is the originator of Kabu Clay Collective, and it's a mutual aid network for Black ceramists of any skill level and educational background. So from here, I'm going to hand it over to Osa. Osa, welcome.
Thank you so much. So I did talk to this group, was it last year?
Yep.
So hopefully you guys remember, but I'll just go and just kind of review a few things I may have mentioned before. So I was born, my parents both came to the US in the mid 70s to go to college in Virginia. They both attended Virginia Tech. I was born in Blacksburg, Virginia, and grew up in the suburbs of Washington, D.C. Like Anna said, I came to ceramics in a very circuitous way. It wasn't anything I was planning. It wasn't anything I grew up knowing about. My mom was always an appreciator of arts and crafts. She was a docent at the Smithsonian Museum of African Art for 20 years. And so she used to give tours, and through her, I was exposed to a lot of African arts and crafts growing up, and I'm using that purposefully, like art from all over the continent. And so, when you're growing up, you never know how all of these experiences are going to come together and converge. But now I'm seeing the value of that exposure, as an adult. So I learned I learned clay mostly through community lessons. I started off at a community center in our community studio in New Orleans, Louisiana, where I was living in 2009. And then I kind of took, the couple classes that they were offering and came to the end of my road there. I had taken advantage of everything they had to offer, so I switched to another studio. That is where I learned to make glazes, load and unload the kiln. So what I had going there was a work trade situation where I was able to take classes and have clay. So I got free class and free material in exchange for my labor. And that labor was making glazes for the studio and, tidying the studio, keeping it clean, loading and unloading the kilns. And through that, that's how I learned the entire process of clay making, because here in the States, typically the format is a weekly class where, you go one day a week, and everything behind the scenes is kind of hidden from you. So you put your pot, you throw a pot on the wheel and you put it on the shelf, and then next week you come back and you might trim it and do all the rest of the stuff, but all of the firing and all that stuff, all of the glaze making is done for you. And so for me, that work trade experience was one of the most important foundations to my education, because I was able to learn the entire process. And not only that, I got basically free class time and material and access to materials. Around that time, I also apprenticed for a woman named Rachel DePaul. She's a studio potter in New Orleans, Louisiana as well. She's still active today. Funny enough, when I think back on this period, I think we were about the same age, but she had been doing pottery, for, I don't know, like 10 years at that point. And so I'm working under her as an apprentice, but we're about the same age. And that's kind of been my experience this whole time, is a lot of the people who are my age have at least double the amount of clay experience that I have, because I got into it, quote unquote, later in life, right? Which I still don't think is later in life. 34 is so young, right? The older you get, the more you're like, the 30s is, you're still a child. But so I worked for Rachel DePaul for a year. She basically taught me the it kind of refined my techniques a little bit to work one-on-one. So my glazing got neater. She did a lot of sgraffito work. And so I don't do sgraffito. I know I use carving, I do carving. But I feel like working for her, and she would do all the outlines and I would go in and like scrape out the negative space. And I think that just getting the feel for that tool, it really did influence my work today. She also taught me really pragmatic things like how to pack a pot so I could ship it and it wouldn't break. Simple stuff like that. And I have become so appreciative for just little tips like that because I've met people since then who tell me, well, I tried to have an online shop and I couldn't get past the shipping part. I can never figure out how to pack my pots so that they wouldn't break in transit. So all of these little bits of information, from working with all these people, helped me build my business and studio practice today in almost a more pragmatic way, I feel, than academia in some ways. So I, like Anna said, I have a background, a bachelor's degree in sociology and women's studies. And so, social justice has always been really important to me. And then I did a 1-year post-bac at Louisiana State University for ceramics. And that was a valuable experience, but at the same time, it was less pragmatic, I would say, than the real life experience I got before going into clay. So as a post-bac, I learned to develop my concept. I learned the importance of having an artist statement. We created mock lesson plans because part of the academic experience is kind of learning to be a teacher, learning to be a professor. At least that's how it was at Louisiana State University. But the actual, how to package a pot, how to make an online site, how to interact with galleries, that wasn't really covered, in that year. So my experience is, it's taken from so many different areas. Last year was my 10th year of pottery making. So I started in 2013, and so 2023 marked a decade for me. And I felt like I still wanted access to just to more experienced ceramicists. And a lot of that for me has to do not just with like actual hands-on process and technique, but actually building relationships with people, knowing what their background is, knowing what their story is. So I decided a few things happened. I got to spend time with Jabu Nala, the South African potter that Anna mentioned. We did a 3-week I got to spend 3 weeks with her where we worked side by side. She taught me her coil building methods. She taught me some of her decoration techniques. But beyond that, it was kind of the experience of working side by side with another African woman who, even though we're from different countries, and even though I was born in the States, she still very much accepted me as another African woman and expressed this feeling that we all come together as Africans based on our cultural respect for elders and just certain universal aspects that of culture that draw us together as a continent and as a diasporic people. And it was a really affirming experience for me. The way that she relates to clay was much different than anything I had ever experienced before. I'd really only ever worked with white American ceramicists. And so I think what I'm getting out of all this experience is the idea that, you know, our values are cultural. When we look at a piece of pottery and we analyze it, I mean, even the act of analyzing is like a cultural thing. The way that we form opinions about what a piece of pottery is supposed to be, that is a cultural thing. And here in the United States, for someone like me who I'm American, and I claim that fully. However, I grew up in a household with Nigerian parents, and so that changes the values that I grew up with are different from other Americans. So I still grew up with that idea of, you would never call an older person by their first name. And I'm still like, when I see Winnie and she's like, call me Winnie, it's still a little bit awkward for me, but I do it just because that's what that's what she prefers. But that's not the culture that I grew up in. Even handing something to my parents with my right hand or left hand is something that I wouldn't do. That's a cultural thing in our culture. So yes, I'm American, but there's still certain things. So how this relates back to clay for me is, I mean, this is really hard to articulate, but I think that there is a kind of Western, like when we engage in critique, what are the values there, right? What are the values? Are we focused more on technique? Um, when I work with somebody like Jabu, who is making this work to honor her ancestors, that is something that is just not a part of Western thinking of how pottery is meant to be used in the world. We don't think about honoring our ancestors in this country when we make a pot. It's just not part of it. And so there were times when we were working together where I'd be like, oh, like this pot, it's cracked, I don't know, and she would be kind of alarmed if she felt like I was going to discard something. Whereas, you go on Instagram today and American potters will be like, bashing a pot with a hammer because it's imperfect. But to her, that was almost like sacrilegious, like I would be ruining a gift from my ancestors because I'm not just here for myself. I'm representing everybody who came before me. And so for me to work with somebody like her was incredibly affirming because I got into clay when I was in my 30s. I already had a set of values. I wasn't needing to be molded in the way that an 18-year-old was. I kind of had a set of values, and it made me wary of what I was being presented with in academia. I was thinking for myself. And so I always felt at odds with what I was being presented with, which is kind of the concept comes before the pot. For me, it was backwards. It was I needed to work and work and work to figure out what my concept was. And then going back and finding the words of people like Magdalene Odundo, who would describe that exact phenomenon, was affirming to me, right? Like I read articles by Magdalene Odundo, which I hope all of y'all know who I'm talking about, but she's a British Kenyan potter who's a professor in England. She would talk about how she wanted her students to learn through their hands and through their experience of making, instead of having a concept that's cerebral, that's supposed to sink back down into the work. And so I've always had to kind of look for these the minority of voices that reflect how I feel about my craft. It was never the case that I felt like I could relate or benefit fully from white Americans, because the approach is just different. The way that people think about the work is different. And so a lot of the way that I think about my work, I would say a fundamental difference is that I think that there is the encouragement of, the individual expression, doing something with clay that no one has ever done before, right? Finding your own unique voice with clay. And for me, I think I do have a unique voice in clay, but that's never been the driving force. For me, it's been more meaningful to tie my work to those who came before me, because we're not an island. And I think that culturally, I'm sorry, I just got lost my train of thought because somebody's whatever. But I think that culturally those values, um, you know, it's kind of, I think that there's no way that we can academic values mirror, our social values, right? What we're bringing to clay, the values that we connect to clay, they mimic our social values, right? And when you grow up in an African household, you might have slightly different social values than the dominant culture. And so that is what I'm trying to express with the pots that I make, is respect for elders and a communal voice, a communal expression rather than an individual expression. Like, I wouldn't be here without other people. I wouldn't be here without my mother. I wouldn't be here without Ladi Kwali, the most renowned Nigerian potter. I wouldn't be here without David McDonald. I wouldn't be here without Winnie. All these people created space for us to exist within this field. So right now well, let me rewind. So around 2016, so that was 3 years after my first lesson, I actually was able to go full time with pottery. I was working part-time as an art teacher before that. And in 2016, I moved to Baton Rouge, Louisiana, which was a cheaper city. And I wanted to take the chance of being a full-time studio potter at that time because my bills had gone down and I was like, this is the time to try. And so since then, that has been my full-time work. And I would say I did about 50% of my sales in person at that time and about 50% online. So using social media and the internet has been a huge component to building a career. I still don't think that's the only way to do it. And till today, I still value in-person connections a lot. And I don't think it's wise to put all of your eggs in one basket when it comes to building your career in that way. I think that joining Instagram, say in 2012, was a lot different than joining Instagram today. It was easier to get traction. It was easier to be seen. There was no algorithm at that time. I would just post a photo a day, and that's basically how I amassed most of my audience up until 2020. But even so, I was doing art markets and art festivals and fairs where I would set up a tent, bring all my pottery out, meet and greet people, talk in person about my work. Since the pandemic, I transitioned 100% online, but then what I did was started prioritizing in-person studio visits. So inviting people to come to my studio. So that is a wonderful thing for me. Now I don't have to bring my pots everywhere and lug them everywhere because we all know there's a ton of labor involved in that, which I was happy to do for a certain amount of time. And so now I get to show people not only my pottery, but the process that goes behind it. I get to show them what clay looks like. A lot of people are still, they don't know anything about the process of making pottery. They don't know what a kiln is called. They don't know what clay looks like or where it comes from or how you found it, so this is public education, right? Bringing people into the studio is a way to educate the public on the process, the equipment, just what it takes to produce these items. And so I don't know what percentage of sales I do in person. It's low. I do I would say at least 90% of my sales online still, but that in-person component is still very important to me. The other way that I like to connect with the public is through workshops. So the last one I did was actually in Gainesville, Florida at a studio called Studio TM. I shared the coil building technique that Jabu shared with me. The difference is I do not show people how to make traditional Zulu pots because that is not my culture and that is not mine to share. But I use her, interesting enough, and to me, this is actually very American. I use her coil building method to make pots. I'll look at Nigerian traditional water vessel forms. I really like the water vessel form. And it also relates to the environment that I live in now. In Florida, where I'm surrounded by, we have bays, we have springs, we have the ocean. And so I use those traditional Zulu coil building methods to make different forms than she would make. Another thing I wanted to mention about that is just the idea of paying attention to what you gravitate to naturally and instinctively. So before I met Jabu, I was, I would see pots like maybe by people, American potters like Linda Christensen, or these Minnesota Mingei potters that look loose and soft. And I was like, oh, what if I made like a loose, soft pot? But my body never really wanted to do that. I always wanted to smooth. I always wanted to have a tight form. And I never understood that until I worked with Jabu and started looking at how Africans have traditionally made pots. Usually there's a lot, and not only Africans, Native Americans, if you look at their coil building process, there's a lot of scraping and refining. Even as a wheel thrower, I had this kind of natural instinct to make that smooth pot, right? My hands always wanted to do that. It just feels good to me. And that's what I mean about needing to work with people who I had a similar, I don't know, I don't want to say similar background, but I think our Africanness tied us together. It was affirming for me. I was like, this is why I want to do these things, even though they're not being reflected back to me. This is why I want to touch the clay in this way, because we've always touched the clay in this way. It's just something that's in you. So I just like to encourage people to, instead of looking outside of yourself and saying like, I want to be like this person, pay attention to the things that you naturally like to do with clay, because clay accepts that. Clay, we can work with clay in any way we choose. We can slab build, we can coil, we can pinch, we can use the wheel. You can smooth and scrape, you can rough up the surface, you can leave, if you pinch, you can leave those pinch marks in, or you can decide to scrape them off at the end. All of these things are acceptable. It's kind of about finding your voice. And what's been helpful to me to find my voice is to find other people in the field that reflect my identity, because it's been affirming for me as a African Nigerian American ceramicist. The last thing I want to talk about is a collective. So a problem that you might not have being in Ghana or elsewhere is that here in Sarasota, I do not know one other Black ceramicist, not one. When I taught for a whole year in a community studio here in Sarasota, Florida, and for that entire year, I did not see a single person of color other than myself. I'm not saying Black, I'm saying a person of color. When there's a library of books in that same community studio, all of those books are about European, American, or Asian ceramic traditions. There is not one book about Native American traditions. There is not one single book about African American or African traditions. So when I say that we're experiencing an isolation here, it's not even just that there isn't another Black person. Our culture is not included, period. It's almost like we have nothing to do with ceramics history, even though we have been making sculpture and pots for millennia, just like any other group of people. Since I would say since 2020, there's been a lot more scholarship and documentation of African Americans and Africans and our legacy as it comes to pottery. But still, in this town that I'm in, I'm all alone. And that plays itself out in a lot of ways that I don't even want to get into right now, but it's been difficult. It's been difficult. And it's been alienating. And so a way for me to deal with that alienation has been to start this collective that is it's actually a virtual collective. And we try our best to create physical spaces for us to meet up. And that has happened at NCECA, and I have a meetup that's going to happen in Alabama at the Alabama Clay Conference this February. That's probably going to be pretty small, but for us to even have 5 Black people together, that means everything to us. So it's a virtual platform. I would love to share, if I could share my screen. Oh, it's disabled. But I can pull up.
Right now.
Okay, all right, here, let me pull it up. Okay. Okay, so We started in 2021. The idea at the time was that we saw all of these predominantly white organizations still in 2020 grappling with how to become more diverse, right? How to include more people of color. For me, it was like too little too late to see people still saying, well, we're listening and learning in 2020. I mean, Black people have been writing about our experience for hundreds of years in this country. If people really want to know, there's information out there. If people really want to change, there's workshops, there's DEI consultants, there's so many resources put in place. And I felt that we could spend all of our time teaching and sharing our experience and talking about these things as if they're brand new, or we could just create our own space and do what it is that we need to do for one another and spend our energy on each other. Because the problem here in this country is that you will run yourself ragged educating white people, and things may or may not even change substantially. What can we do for each other? You know, what can we do for each other? So the first thing that we did was create a space to just discuss amongst each other. And that was a free chat room on an app called Discord that y'all might be familiar with. But it was simply a free platform for us to just speak to one another. That simple, because we didn't have that. A lot of us didn't have that ability. And I'm not talking to you just about isolation. There are people who were talking about experiences of academic abuse, having racist, what do you call it, advisors in graduate school who got in the way of their graduation. I mean, there's a lot going on. This isn't just about representation and diversity. There's trauma. This is not easy, being isolated in this way all the time. It can be unsafe. And so we created a safe space for each other to be able to talk about these things and believe each other without having to explain. And so that chat group became this website. We just recently got our nonprofit status, so we changed our website to caboclay.org. It used to be caboclaycollective.com, but we're making it so that no matter what you put in, it's going to direct you to this site. But here, I'm just going to scroll through and show you. We have a lot of Nigerian members, and that is because we are partnered with a group called Visions in Clay. Now, if any of you have WhatsApp, I can tell you how to access this group, but it's called Visions in Clay. And actually this right here, can you see my cursor?
Mhm.
This is the leader, Atoe Arinze. He's the co-founder and co-coordinator of the group. They do is it weekly or monthly artist talks? They invited me to do an artist talk, and that's how I became connected with them. So this is a nice example of how Cabo can work to bring us together. So they invited me to do this workshop or this artist talk via WhatsApp. And then from there, we just started both of our groups started interacting. So some of their members were already a part of Cabo at that time, but even more came on board. I know that, Adara Willard is an American professor. She's in California now. She did a exhibit at NCECA last year featuring all women and non-binary Black ceramicists. And she was able to draw from Visions in Clay. So there were people in Visions in Clay in Nigeria who were able to exhibit at NCECA because of this connection that we've built. One of our members actually just did a fundraiser for a Nigerian ceramicist that's part of their group. So now the groups are kind of like this. Cabo actually sent a bunch of colorants and oxides that Nigerians can't access, not because they don't have these resources, but because they don't have these facilities that process materials to be usable for ceramics. So of course, everybody has like a lot of, you can find cobalt and copper in a lot of different places all over the earth. But what you need is that facility that's going to grind it down to the mesh size. And that's what they're lacking. So we provided that for them. And so now they are going to show us pictures from an exhibit that they did at the end of last year that incorporated some of these oxides so that they could expand their expression, right? So these are ways that we are communicating with each other. So for me, it's like, I'm sorry, what's that? So for me, it can't always be in person. I'm geographically isolated, but it's given my life a lot of meaning to be able to communicate with Black ceramicists from literally around the world anytime I want to. I mean, my weeks are definitely filled with phone calls and conversations with Black ceramicists from all over the country and all over the world. And so that has been helpful for me personally, and I see how it's been helpful for other people. So here, it just keeps going and going and going. There's probably, I think about 130 people listed here. And so what this directory does is, I mean, you can contact any of these people. All of their websites are linked. Most of them are on Instagram or social media. We also have a discussion forum. So, I mean, this is like, I mean, we've only gone a third of the way, so it's pretty extensive here. And, you know, people like Sana have told me that they use a directory to even just show their students how many Black ceramicists there are out there. Some people don't even know that that's the case, that we're out here. We also have a discussion forum that I can't really show you. It's behind a login, and it's not used all the time. People are on social media more than they are on anything right now. However, it's just a nice, safe space. It's password protected, so you have to be a member of Cabo to access it. We share employment opportunities. We share social opportunities. People ask questions about technique if they have them. It's just a way for us to gather in a private or a semi-private space. Like I said, last year, here we go. We did, Instagram is just the best way to show this stuff. And if you don't follow us already, please do. It's just Cabo Clay. So here's Joy's work. Joy just entered herself in our directory. And so yeah, this is an example of our next meetup is going to be at Charles Smith's studio in Mobile, Alabama. He's a potter with, I don't know, 40, 50 years of experience. We're going to gather a small group and go and speak with him, and he's going to tell us. And it's that same thing of, you know, seeking out our elders and learning from them and creating a community from them. A lot of this talk about elders came to me during 2020 when what predominantly white institutions were trying to correct the lack of diversity and were using Instagram as their main way of finding new Black ceramicists to promote and to invite. But what that does is it kind of cuts out a lot of older people. So people were asking people like me, who had only been in the field for a few years, to come teach here and come do this and come do that. And I'm honored to have been asked. However, I knew that there were people like David McDonald who have been in the field for 50 years. Why wouldn't he be at the top of your list? Why wouldn't Sana or Sid Carpenter or any of these people be at the top of your list just because they're not using Instagram in the same way? And why is social media the way that we're doing this anyway? That to me is like the most superficial way to do research. So here we've done free virtual workshops for people who need help crafting their bios and artist statements. If you're applying for shows, if you're applying for grad school and you need help with writing, that's one of the workshops that we offered. We did a pot swap. This is a free way just to get people connected through the mail. So if you're like me and you're geographically isolated, at least it would be a nice thing to trade mail, trade pots with other Black ceramicists in the country that you might be geographically separate from. This is a photo from the oxides that we sent to the Nigerian ceramicists, and we're still awaiting the pictures from the work that they were able to make with this. Yeah, this is Paul Briggs, me, and David McDonald at Harvard Ceramics in the spring. Okay. Okay, so these are the biggest initiative that Cabo Clay has, and this is open to everyone internationally, is the award for Black ceramicists. And so what we typically annually what we do and what we've been doing since 2021 is we have a sale of pottery that's all donated by our members. So in a way, it's a showcase of Black ceramicists and Black ceramics work. Winnie donated to the last one. Of course, I donate every year. I run this initiative. And we make an application available. Last year, we were able to raise $10,000 through the sale of our artwork and through private donations. It was about 50-50. And we went through applications as a team. There are about 4 or 5 of us on the review team last year. We went through each of these applications and we decided based on consensus who we would like to fund. And this was our one of our top winners was Yinka Orifedia. She is doing work under the name Oya Studios, which is a studio museum for Black ceramicists in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. She is hosting a wood fire. I don't want to say conference. It's just kind of a get together, but it's a wood firing gathering for Black ceramicists that happens at Hambidge Center. And so we funded her for next year. So she got $5,000 to secure Hambidge for the same gathering this year. So it's going to happen on Juneteenth, which is an important day for Black Americans here in the States. We also gave $2,000 to Bond Workshop. They are a clay studio in Senegal. And they had been operating with one wheel up until this year. So $2,000 went to them. So international networks and connection are super important to the collective. It's not just about us here. And then the remaining $3,000 was actually anonymously donated to 2 members who were experiencing extreme hardship. And one of those had to do with extremely racist and ableist and homophobic experiences within a well-known institution and within the ceramics world. And so we felt like the least we could do is provide some type of material support to this person as they graduated, but they wanted their privacy. And so we were happy to make this an anonymous grant to this individual. There were actually 2 different individuals. One was just based on general hardship, like, you know, health crises and housing crises. And this is a person who was involved in Cabo from the beginning. And so we had a relationship with this person and were felt great about offering this support. So that is where our award money went to last year. You can see this is this is the team that decided that made the decisions around who would get grant funding for the last award cycle. Ebi Baralaye, Nigerian American, just like me. Sherrod Fox, who actually built our entire website. Liz LaRue, who's also on the board of Cabo Clay, and myself. So yeah, I could keep going and going and going, but this is kind of this is a gathering from Last in Sika, which I was not able to attend, but Nsika was able, Cabo was able to provide free passes for, I don't know, at least 20 ceramicists and housing for about the same number of people last year to make it more accessible for Black ceramicists to be able to attend this very expensive conference that happens annually here. So this was the house that we rented for people to stay in. This is them having dinner. I wish I could have been there. There's Diana Adams who did all of the fundraising for that initiative. So
Yeah, can we have some question time, Osa? How are you feeling about that? Are you ready for
I'm feeling
some?
great about it.
Yay. And if someone's uncomfortable with saying the question, don't forget there's the chat and I'm keeping an eye on it. So you could ask your question on the chat if you're more comfortable doing that. Otherwise, yeah.
Yeah, no, sorry.
Oh,
I
it's
don't have a
fine.
question, but I have a comment based on like the presentation.
Okay, good.
First of all, I am thrilled. I am thrilled to my God that I am first of all part of this group. And
And
Anna actually
we're thrilled
introduced me.
too.
Yes, I'm thrilled. Like I'm hearing artists speak, and I'm like, where have I been all my life? And connecting, and it just felt like home again. Everything I resonate with everything back from like my point of coming to the US and how I had to struggle my way racism with my instructor and had to deal with that. I've still forged my way through, and then finding my path to this group and then meeting this amazing community. I'm just honored. And I look forward to exploring more. I look forward to advancing more within this. I'm even more encouraged that I'm not just alone in this. I have other members, I have other people that I can connect with. It's an amazing experience. Without a heartbeat, I would go all over and over again with this. But I just wanted to express that it was a yearning desire for me to say that. Thank you so much. Yes.
Well, thank you for being a part of it. And I just have to say that, I mean, this is a very emotional issue for us, you know, it really is hard. And, you know, this is something I created for myself because I knew that other people were in this situation. And I also just wanted to say that this isn't a top-down organization. So I think a lot of people have that idea of, you know, people contact us and they're like, what are you doing next? What can we get from this group? But the strength of this group is that you, Joy, can say, this is what I think needs to happen. You can come to me at any time and say, I have an idea. How can I use a collective to make this happen? And
Yeah.
so an example of that would be, um, so, you know, like a Daryl Willard came to us last year and said, I want to make this exhibit happen. I want there to be an exhibit of all Black women and non-binary ceramicists in a big room in Nsika. This is my vision. And we at the time had the funding to be able to partially help fund this idea. So what we need is for everybody in the this is why we call it a collective, because it's really not top down. I know it seems that way, and we're used to organizations being that way. And for the purposes of our paperwork, we had to write that I am the founder, I am the chair. But really, we can't do any of this without all of you. So we need everybody to say, this is what's missing for me in my life. How can I come to the collective and use that collective as its own resource? And we haven't had a lot of money, but we've been able to make a big impact because there's so many people involved. And without calling out, okay, I'm going to call it out. So the Color Network was an organization that came way before us. And I have always wondered how to be a part of the Color Network, and I never could do it. I could never get them to talk to me. I could never get them to collaborate with me, right? And so when we went about doing this, creating this, we wanted it to be open to everyone. The frustrating part of that is that people are so used to things being closed that people tend to treat Cabo like that, like it's a closed group and that there's officers that are in charge and they're doing everything. But that's why we have the directory, to show that the collective is all of these people. And that anytime you can say, I want to have a virtual meetup, or I'm in Minneapolis and I want to get people together. I mean, I actually have, I mean, if you look on that directory, Joy, are you located in Minnesota?
Joyce
Joy,
in Missouri.
Missouri. Okay, I'm sorry. I thought it was Minnesota. But there are a handful of Black ceramicists in places like this that can come together and make things happen. And they will find themselves. I've heard this millions of times, not millions, dozens of times, that people who thought that they were isolated found each other through the directory. Sana told me that she didn't know that Camille Beckles I mean, these are two Black ceramicists that are in Queens, but they found each other through the directory and now they're in touch. These are the types of things that happen all the time. So the whole point is to decrease isolation. And it's a platform that everyone can actually be involved in. You don't need to be, you know. So anyway, Joy, thank you for joining, and please just keep in touch with me. That is the best way to be a part of the collective and connected to the larger group. And I just need to keep spreading the message that it's not about waiting for us to do something for you. It's you. Please be a part of this. Tell us what you need so that we can lend resources to help make this thing happen.
Can I say something?
Yes, Lenny, please.
I want, pardon me. I've been doing some research over 40 years of writing about the history of African American ceramicists. And it's been very difficult at this stage because I have a room full of boxes of information that I just can't go through by myself. But what I wanted the young people to know, and I hate to say that, what I want everybody to know is that I I went to the Philadelphia College of Art, who just dropped their ceramics program. The average ratio was 1 to 100 African Americans to non-African Americans. And I would ask questions like when they were talking about Chinese, Japanese, whatever, English, whatever. I would say, well, what about African? What about Africa? And they said, well, what about Africa? And I said, well, are there any other people other than, the usual fare? And they were saying no. And I'm saying to myself, I said, but Time magazine had a cover at the time with a Black Adam and Eve telling the truth about what goes on. I just want you all to know that Osha's story is one that would be a great kind of, and I guess Osha, that's why this is your program, that people understand that there are many ways to get into the kind of play situation that you want. But I do want you all to know that you are right. There is a problem with people my age. I'll be 75 in July. And I struggle, ask Anna, I struggle to get on Zoom with, I just can't have that. But I think it's important. Now, let me just say about where I'm writing from the 18th century to the 20th century. I'm not including the 21st. And there's an age thing because I'm trying to tell the story of the history of African American ceramicists. So Osa knows some, but I know about 150 others. But I need help. It's overwhelming. I don't know why I started this. And also to know that my parents supported me as a young girl. And I'm talking about 7, 8, 9, 10 to do clay in the segregated school right down the street from where I live now. So, I mean, the history seems to just never stop, the negative part of it. And you just have to keep going. I don't care what anybody says. The end story of what I was saying to my professors at the University of the Arts, which was called PCA when I was going there, because they were so negative about this, I started with a group called Ile Ife Black Humanitarian Center in North Philly. And that was the changing part in my work. And that's when I made a promise to myself that I was going to go to the continent and learn how to do ceramics, because I know that there was more than Japanese or English, So that's what I did. I went to Festac. And if you don't know what Festac is, please look it up. I went to Festac, then I met a woman in the village in Ipetumodu. and I got an NEA grant, went back that summer, and worked with the women. And then I met Lottie Kawali because I followed her around when the World Health Association brought her to the United States and brought her to very different places. And someone has given me 3 Lottie Kawali pots because they thought that I would be the one to, understand its value. I went back and learned Yoruba at the university. I was at Howard to go back to talk to these women. And these women were introduced. I was introduced to these women as a potter from across the water. And for years of me working with them, it wasn't until I brought a picture of my Volkswagen under snow and things like that they understood. They weren't talking about the ocean. I mean, they thought that I was a potter from across the ocean, meaning that I had come back, that I was born in Nigeria, because when I went back, I was speaking Yoruba. And so from there, I went and studied with Blue Corn in California. She's was an indigenous artist, ceramic artist. And now I'm in a village for the last 10 plus years in Ghana called Kuli. And I basically, when I was in Nigeria and in Ghana, my position is that I'm always going to be an apprentice. Unfortunately, there are some people of European descent, when they go to a place like Kuli, like Ile Ife, they stay there for a summer and then they write a book, and they're the expert. When what Ocean was saying about how this stuff moves itself through the universe and into you, you're part of whatever it's going to be. So if anybody is near Falls Church, Virginia, let me know. You've got a couple of days to help me go through some boxes. I'd greatly appreciate it.
Might find somebody on the Kabu side. No, Osa?
No, I thought you were working with Yinka. Yinka told me she was helping you with this.
Yinka is, but I need more people than Yinka. I have Yinka. I have 2 students that I taught in high school and 1 in college who do a round. One will come one time, then the other one will come the next time and help me. So it's been slow, but Yinka is an amazing woman. And Osa, I'm seeing you now in the same light. And I'm sure that the ladies in Ghana and Kumasi, Sam, is that right, Kumasi?
Yes, that's Kumasi, yes.
I'm sure that, anyway.
Well, I also wanted to mention that the collective wouldn't have come to be without conversations between myself and Yinka. So Yinka was a part of the Color Network. And so we discussed what we wished was happening instead. And those conversations made Cabo come to life. And that's what also made Oya Studios come to life. So we're like sisters. I mean, I almost see no division. Like anything that they do, we're right behind them. We want to support it. So Yinka's doing a lot of programming at Nsika this year. Since I can't be there, I'm saying whatever you need, like for the gathering that happened at the coffee shop last year, Cabo is going to fund that. So that's what I mean about how this is not top down. Yinka is not a formal part of our, she's not an officer. She is a Black ceramicist with a vision. And we're saying, how can we support your vision? How can we use a collective to support your vision? That's it. So any of you here can say, I have an idea of things that could benefit other Black ceramicists, and you can bring that to Cabo and we will help you do it to the best of our ability. And that it could be anything. And I think people need to become more creative. Like a lot of people think the only thing you can do as a ceramicist is a gallery show. No, you can do anything. Adaro, we did the pot swap, which I thought was really cute because it costs no money and it got our work into each other's hands. We were writing each other. It took us off the internet. Once again, it did not cost anything, which I think people they can't envision activities that don't cost money. All it cost was shipping. And we made sure that it was an 8x8 box. So it was like, $10, $15 that you were actually spending out of your own pocket if you could to ship your package from point A to point B. So yeah, again, Yinka is doing her own thing. She's, the Oya Studios is not a Cabo project. However, because it fits with our mission, we will do anything we can to support that. And now that we're a nonprofit, we would be happy to umbrella. Now we like the Color Network, as I understood it, has always been umbrellaed by another organization. But now we are a Black ceramics collective that has our own nonprofit status. So now we can use that and share that resource with anyone. So now, Winnie, I'm offering this to you. If you find out about any organizational grants, because this might be something to address for any of you that are, thinking about grant funding. There's individual artist grants, and then there's organizational grants. Individual artist grants can be applied for by anyone. You don't need any special status, and that's great because you don't need any special status. However, that means that a lot of people apply for them. So competition might be higher. So the thing that you can do with organizational grants is there's fewer people vying for these grants because fewer people have organizational status. So Winnie, I can say to you, if you find any grants out there that are organizational grants and you would like to do that using the our nonprofit status, I'm happy to share that with you if that's helpful. You see what I'm saying? So everything that we have is not just for us, it's for everyone. And that is how it needs to be. Like, we can't just be creating organizations. Again, going full circle back to the beginning of this conversation. Organizations can't just mirror the typical American values where I'm not using this as a vehicle to social climb in the ceramics world. You know what I'm saying? Like, this isn't about me having special status or anything individualistic. This is for everyone. It really is for everyone.
So the question about our students from Ghana, they can apply to be part of the collective, correct?
It's open to any Black
So
ceramicist.
no matter where they are. I just want to be sure, and I want to reiterate that to our,
you saw all the Nigerian
here, and some will be seeing this recorded. So I just wanted to kind of make sure that that was very clear. And one of the reasons that both Sana and I wanted Osa to talk about this organization was that we felt this is some way to make a connection that will be extremely helpful in your career and your desire to move on and work in ceramics. So if Matilda and Patience that are here, spread the word.
People like to go to NCICA for social networking, but the Cabo is also a way to social network. It's a way to get found for exhibits. It's a way to connect to opportunities as well.
We're a little over time, but is there maybe one more quick question somebody might have?
I just want to thank Osa. That was such an amazing presentation. You are such a delightful person. The way that you build bridges and make community is so inspirational for everyone. So thank you for sharing all of this and for all your hard work. That was really fantastic.
Thank you, Rebecca.
Thank you, Osa. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
And
thanks for being here. And just
I'm
contact
sure
me if you have any questions.
Yes, I'll do that.
Great. Thank you, everyone.